I'm going to demonstrate the mechanics of the rear naked choke. I won't talk about from back control. I'm just going to talk about the initial setup of obviously bringing the arm around our opponent's neck, and then obviously the mechanics of the actual squeeze. Okay, so. Alright, let's have a look at what we just did then. Okay, so any sort of choke, if I'm talking about choking, two different chokes. One is obviously a blood choke, the other is an obstruction to the airway. If we're talking generally about choking, choking basically is, we're not talking about the choking at the dinner table when you actually choke on your food, we're talking about strangulation. Okay, so technically, we refer to these as strangulations because we're cutting off the blood to the brain, all right? If you look at the circumference of the neck, all right, there's a lot of hardware going on in there, and what we're doing is we're plugging off the arteries to the brain. Usually takes between 5 to 8 seconds for someone to go unconscious, all right? So when we do this technique, we obviously always enforce our tap-out rule, and I like to hold the position for 10 seconds. Reason being I like to hold the position for 10 seconds is one, it gives them plenty of time to tap, and two, it also shows you to see if you're correctly doing it, and if they don't tap, obviously they're going to get put to sleep, or you may be doing the technique incorrectly. But generally when we do these chokes, I make sure that my training partner understands the tap-out rule. So, I have Anth here, he's sitting down. Now, I'm going to slide my arm around his neck. Okay, so the blade of my hand is going to come palm facing down, and what I'm going to do, I'm not actually going to throw my arm down and then back, okay, because if I do that, that's a possibility, an arm lock. So I'm not throwing my arm forward. What I'm doing is I'm snaking my arm down and under the chin. Now, if we're talking self-defense and I do have back control and my opponent has his head down and it's difficult for me to get my hand in, well then because it's self-defense, there's all things we can do. One being we can fish hook under the eyes, okay? Also, there's a really good pressure point that's under the nose. So if Anth keeps a tight chin, I find the pressure point and I lift from here. It's very painful. If it's competition, I can just pick the back of the forehead and then come in this way. So here, I'm going to snake my arm under Anth's neck. I want to try and line up my elbow with his chin. So I'm not so much here, you still can get the squeeze. I want to line my elbow up with his chin. The idea is my forearm here is cutting off this side of his neck and my bicep is cutting off the other side of his neck. So I want to slide this thing in nice and deep, and I want to latch onto the back of his trap. Also, what I like to do is I like to bring my chin over my hand. So try and pull my hand away, Anth. It's very difficult for him to pull my arm away, okay? Whereas if my hand's here, yeah, you can pull my arm away. So I want to hide this thing behind the back. Sometimes I can even grab the back of the neck, but I like this, where I grab the back of the trap and then I cover with my chin. Try and get it now, Anth. All right, very difficult. Now to finish, what I'm going to do, as I explained before, I don't throw my arm over the top, tap, okay, because I can get armbarred. From here, I want to line my hands up as an arrow. So my hand is going to come behind the back of his head. I'm going to snake this arm all the way through, and I should be able to see your fingernails on this side of his head. Now from here, my hand is on his trap, is going to latch on top of the bicep, okay? From here to finish, all I'm going to do is I keep my head in nice and tight to reinforce a wedge so he can't peel my hand back out. So try and pull my hand out, Anth. Okay? Whereas if it's on the top of the skull, you can pull it out. So I want to hide this behind the back of his head. Now all I do to finish is I squeeze my elbows together and then I retract my elbow. I want to turn my elbow and pull back in that direction. Alright, so that's the rear naked choke. So one more time really quick. Another thing, yeah, some people do tell me all the time what happens if they try and go for the eyes. Do this, okay, so that's a valid point. I mean, I think it's good to think about all things that could happen in a self-defense situation. So if I remember, I would be keeping my head down and closing my eyes and looking away. And I reinforce my head. So who tries to eye gauge me down? So I keep my head in tight, whereas if I'm here, yes, eye gouges are a thing too. So once I lock in the rear naked choke, so here I slide my arm all the way around his neck. I line the elbow up with the V of his chin. My hand comes to the back of his trap. Now I cover my chin over the top of his, over my wrist. From here, my other hand arrows in behind the back of his neck. I want to snake this all the way through, so I should be able to see your fingernails on the other side of his head. Now from here is my hand that's on his trap is going to latch. So I roll my elbow over and I latch this thing up onto my shoulder. Preferably you can grab the bicep. I like to get it nice and deep onto the shoulder. And now to finish, all I'm doing is I reinforce my head as a wedge. I squeeze my elbows and I retract my elbow back this way. All right? And that's the rear naked choke.